Hey guys, welcome to our first episode of Full of Paranormal BS. My name is Colin.
And I'm Jess. We met in college and instantly hit it off because we both love all things haunted.
The only difference we had is that I'm a believer of ghosts.
And I'm a full blown skeptic. This naturally led to many debates over the years, and eventually we were like, hey, let's record this shit.
So that's what we're doing. And the first topic we've chosen is none other than one of the most famous hauntings of all time, the Amityville Horror.
So without further ado, let's turn on that spirit box and get going.
So you're going to push that button on the
No,
right
I know
side?
how to do it.
And are you sure? Because last time we had this conversation.
It's just a radio. I got it.
Okay.
The Amityville Horror stems from a confirmed tragedy and a disputed haunting. In November 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr. murdered 6 members of his family inside their home at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York. 1 year later, George and Kathy Lutz purchased the house at a reduced price. After living there for 28 days, the Lutz family fled, later claiming they experienced disturbing and unexplained phenomena. Their account was popularized in Jay Anson's 1977 book, The Amityville Horror, which sparked widespread public fascination, skepticism, and debate. To this day, the case remains one of the most well-known and controversial stories in paranormal history, dividing opinion between those who believe the events reflect a genuine haunting and those who view them as exaggeration or fabrication. So the question remains, was Amityville the site of something truly unexplained, or a story shaped by suggestion, stress, and profit? Now, there are lots of theories about Ronald DeFeo Jr., aka Butch, on what his motive was for killing his family. Do you have any theories?
Yeah, there are a lot of theories hanging out there, such as, possession, paranormal activity, and all of that. Do I think that Ron himself was necessarily possessed? No, I don't. I actually think that the land or the house itself, evidence has suggested that Ron practiced some sort of witchcraft or Satanism there in the house. So do I think that maybe there was something there that was say, hey, maybe you should do this or maybe you should do that, whether it was inner voices, whether it was craziness in itself, whether it was something that was undetermined, such as maybe a depression or anything such as that. But no, I think Ron did everything, his own accord.
And for this first question, I guess we agree. I think personally, from what I've read about it, I think his motive was money. I know that there was like rumors that Butch was the beneficiary of like 200 grand in insurance policy uh when the parents passed, at least. Like, I can think of motives he had for the parents. There's reports that Ronald DeFeo, not to speak ill of the deceased, but there's reports that he wasn't very kind to his family, that he was quite abusive, actually.
That's another thing, though, and I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but it kind of goes to my idea of this idea of maybe the house was a possession in itself, because when paranormal activity sometimes starts in the home, and the idea of you have all these negative feelings and emotions that are emanating outside of you and they are manifested inside the property itself. So if we're talking that the father was possibly a well-known abuser in a sense of not, we don't really know if it was physical or verbal, but all of that negativity is going into the house.
Butch himself said that his father was abusive. He admitted that he tried to, before the murders, he tried to kill his father once when he was abusing the eldest sister, Dawn. He said that he pointed a gun, he pulled the trigger, and that the gun didn't go off.
Yeah, there were multiple claims. I definitely do remember basically restating with you was that Dawn and Butch were kind of what's the word I'm looking for? They were the ones who were kind of abused like the most. They were the oldest, I believe. And then there was also this crazy idea that when, Ron, he concocted this idea that Dawn actually was the one who said, we need to murder the family. We need to get rid of everyone. And he tried to stop her.
Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff backing that up. I came across this archive online from this author who wrote a book about the DeFeo murders. I believe his name is Rick Osuna. Osuna. I'm so sorry if I said that incorrectly,
If
but
you're listening, Rick.
yeah, but he has a really, really great archive of things. What was the point I was trying to make? What were we just talking about? I got distracted by Rick.
Something shiny. No, it was the idea of Dawn was
Yes.
actually the
Okay.
instigator of all of this.
So on that website in his archive, he actually has the boyfriend of Dawn at the time, uh, I guess, was going to testify, or he did testify, but there's a document he has on there basically saying that the boyfriend said that, yeah, Dawn was on a lot of drugs and she hated her family. And the boyfriend lived in Florida. It was a long distance relationship. And I guess Dawn's parents were very, very much against it, because she wanted to move out there, and they were very much against that, according to him. He thinks that she did it so that she could move to Florida. And in the report, he said he believes that she was using Butch. But I'm not gonna justify a murderer, okay? But I mean, is there motive there? Also, there was gun residue. There was gun residue found on her nightgown as well in the autopsy report, I believe.
That was the other thing, was that the autopsy report showed that, it was clear that no one woke up. The parents were shot first, and then it
Mhm.
went to the sisters, and then it went to the two younger brothers, room to room to room, which no one had woken up. And Ron had suggested that he had drugged them, or that was the suggestion,
Yes,
but
he
but
did.
the toxicology reports showed that there was no drugs in their system.
Okay,
Now, it
okay, okay,
it
okay.
was the
No, no, no.
70s.
Yes. Yes, yes, it was the '70s, for
Yeah,
one. That is
yeah.
is one of the points I was gonna argue. But also could not find any evidence other than, like, reports, like authors basically saying that nothing was found in the system. But I came across this New York Times article that was really cool. I don't know if cool is the right word for it, but it basically said that they were mostly that's what their main investigation was, is that they thought that he used barbiturates to did I say that correctly? Barbiturates?
Barbiturates, yeah, and he would have had access to it
Yeah.
because he was a long-term drug abuse, mainly LSD and heroin, so he would have had a
Yeah.
seller, dealer, whatever, of barbiturates. Yeah, and it does make sense, but also, like, what never made sense to me as far as, them finding the body, well, I understand that, yes, absolutely, maybe no one in the house, like, woke up because they were under the barbiturates, they were drugged, completely understandable, but the way their bodies were found, right? They were face down with their heads above, or their hands above their
Yeah.
heads, almost gripping. But also, here's the other thing, no neighbors, nobody around this property heard gunshots at 3 o'clock in the morning. And also, the other thing is that he used a rifle. It was a 35 caliber Marlin rifle. Rifle in general is super loud. So he didn't drug the whole neighborhood, right? So how
No,
come no one else heard this?
don't know. I mean, I know they said, like, no silencer existed, but what if you just hit it? I don't know.
I feel like there would have been like, if he would have put
I
a
don't know
pillow
how
over the gun or something,
silencers
there would
work.
have been, yeah.
I can't attest to how silencers work, but they said no silencer was equipped on it. But, like, in theory, he had all this time. He bathed afterwards. He went to work
He hid the weapon.
afterwards.
Yeah, he went to work, he
Yeah,
hid the
he hid the
weapon,
weapon.
yeah.
Yeah, just because there wasn't a silencer on it doesn't mean, like, in my opinion, that he couldn't have taken it off and then disposed of that separately.
Well, okay, so but really quickly though, when we talk about silencers don't, and if I'm please anyone listening, do research for me, but from my
I don't know
understanding,
anything about guns.
silencers don't exist for rifles. Like there's nothing for silencer for a rifle itself. So they didn't exist. But the other thing is that it's not like he used a potato or a feather pillow, because there was no evidence suggesting that these bullets went through anything aside from their intended victims. So I will just say, on the weirdness level of the case, when I, talk about paranormal, that's weird,
Yes.
right?
No,
It's weird.
there is admittedly weird shit about that case. There
Yes.
is, like, even in the articles I read, like, that were published at the time before all the haunting stuff even came out, professionals were like, "This was weird." So, the position thing I think is weird, personally. I know this isn't helping my side very much, but I think it's weird. But I have thought about it I have thought about it, and if they were all drugged, and if they were all lying in different positions, and in theory, if Butch was the one that did all of them, and if he couldn't look at them in the face, what if he just repositioned them before he even shot them?
True.
Is that possible?
Absolutely. Yeah, just turning them over,
Is that a
really. I mean,
possible
it's
theory?
not yeah, because the idea of a murderer killing his family and not looking them in the face is psychologically well, psychology 101 essentially. Like he, doesn't really want to see any of that. I'm sure that shooting his parents was probably easier because if there was that type of abuse, it's the idea of,
Mhm.
I'm going to shoot my dad for the abuse and then shoot my mom for not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the brothers and sisters were concerned, that's a whole different level of psychology that I don't have a degree in.
Yeah. I mean, but the thing is, when Butch was named the main suspect, apparently, like, neighbors and people close to the family, they were not surprised whatsoever.
Yeah. Yes,
No
very true. Well, and
surprise.
that's because everyone knew about his drug use. He was constantly strung out. He was always on something. That was very common.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll never know his motive because he passed now, right?
Correct. Yeah, he
He passed,
he
yeah,
was
in
69 years
prison.
old. Yeah, and he was in prison. It was yeah, March 12th of 2021, I believe.
Now, do we think the Lutz family was aware of the DeFeo murders?
I know they were aware of the murders.
Yeah,
I know they were aware of the murders. I'm sorry, Colin. I'm sorry. But I know they
take
were
it.
aware of the murders.
Yeah, I agree with you. They
Yeah,
were very much aware.
yeah. Well, I mean, when they looked at the house, apparently when they looked at the house is when they became aware of it. Also, the house was being sold at like a ridiculously reduced price because of the murders. Not only were they made aware of the murders at the when they saw the house, but after they bought the house, they actually met up with William Weber, who was the attorney for the DeFeo family and for Butch. They had a night of drinking, and this comes directly from William Weber himself. They had a night of drinking where he told them everything about the case. Yeah, I know they did. What do you got? What do you got, Colin?
Yeah, essentially they had to have known when they bought the house. And I'm sure being curious people, going back on that, is that if I wasn't from there and I just bought this house, I'm going to look to see what happened. They said, "Oh, well, yeah, 6 people were killed here. This is the guy who did it. He literally just had a trial." I'm going to go research that myself as well. We know that George and Kathy were perfectly capable of doing that. George was reported going to the library, all the time. Actually, they were from California. Anyway, yes, I know that for a fact.
Wait, they lived in California?
Yes, they lived in California, and the reason why I know that is because I was watching the documentary of My Amityville Horror, which was the eldest son, um, Danny, and he had stated that prior to Amityville, Kathy, or his real mom, because George Lutz was not his biological father, and his siblings all lived in George's home in California. So, yeah, so they had to have known when kind of talk about what's his face there, William Weber. I did a lot of research on William Weber and
He's a
this
character.
idea, he's very much a character, but I say shady character. And I say this because going back and looking like William Weber immediately, like as soon he started defending, Butch, and then he was writing him letters talking about book deals and this and that. Like he was in it for the money right away. Do I think that William Weber could have easily, because he did come out and say, "Hey, we were drinking, we made all this kind of stuff up, yada, yada, yada." But that case was dismissed. It was never basically brought to anything. And the case ended up getting dismissed. And then you had your side of people who are like, "Yeah, we believe William did that," or "Yeah, we believe the Lutzes did that." But we also have a lot of evidence that states that William Weber wasn't so much wanting to defend DeFeo as anything but getting the money out of it. He was writing him letters when he was in prison saying, "Hey, I'm talking to this guy about a book deal. Hey, I'm talking to this guy
Yeah,
about a movie deal. He's going to pay me
you're
that."
not
So he
wrong.
seemed yeah, he seemed to be very much about making the money just about the DeFeos, right? That was his
Mhm.
whole thing. And I don't know if maybe he thought this trial was going to make him bigger as a lawyer or not.
He for sure was trying to profit. I've
Yes.
seen interviews where he basically admitted that at that meeting I was talking about, where they were drinking and talking about the DeFeo case and such, that he also pitched the idea of, like, profiting off of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And my thing is that what did the Lutzes have to gain? Right? Why would they kind of sit back, drink a whole bunch of bottles of wine, and then all of a sudden be like, "Hey, like, William, how are you doing? Let's make up this whole haunted house tale so we could get something out of it." Because honestly, there was no guarantee they were going to get anything out of it, any fame or anything such as that. So it was like, what did the Lutzes have to gain from doing this, if anything at all?
So, do you think that the Lutz family is believable? Do you think that they were just doing it for fame? Do you think they have any other motives?
Yeah, so I'll take this one because I do think that what they experienced in the house really happened. To the extent, no, I do think a lot of it might have been added on over the years because of the sensationalism that was happening, especially in the 70s. You also have to remember that paranormal type happenings were rather large in the 70s. But I do think what actually happened once again to an extent.
So the question was, do I think they're believable, right? No, I don't. Like, okay, so they have one thing going for them. Especially George. They have a very monotone way of speaking, both with Kathy and George. And so to me, I don't know, just because they spoke that way, I feel like that kind of made it sound believable just because they were so like monotone about all of it when they speak about it. You don't see them saying any of it with a lot of feeling. But yeah, I think they had plenty of money to gain from this. I think they took William Weber's idea and frickin' ran with it. What I think they got into this very expensive, beautiful house that was built in the 20s, I believe, and then they found out, "Oh, there's a lot of issues with this house. How can we get rid of this house quickly and make our money back at the same time?" So, I think they
They
had.
lost money. That was the thing was that they were not in the house long enough to make a payment for their bank, and then they had to sell it back to their bank. So
Yeah.
they lost money, and then they had
You're
to go to
okay, so
court for all of this.
you're telling me they you know how many interviews they did?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Do you know how much they must have profited off of the book, which Jay Anson needed them for the rights. Like, he was using their story. He had to get the rights through them. And that book was a huge success, and then they made a movie off of it. You're telling me that they didn't profit at all from their names and likeness being used in a famous book and a famous movie?
I'm sure that they did. I'm sure there was some definite profits made off of it.
All the press they had to do for all of it?
So here's
I
the other
mean,
thing though, is that if you go and once again, I'm gonna kind of the idea of like referencing the 70s. A lot of guests on let's just kind of like the what they had back then. Like today, we have like the Tonight Show and all that kind of stuff. When regular people were usually on air, they didn't get paid anything. Right. There was nothing that was really going in their pockets from going on these like late night host shows. So when Jay wrote the book, they sent in recordings and he changed a lot of names, he changed a lot of things. And there was no mention whatsoever that I could find anyway that they actually profited off of the book because Jay Anson put his own money into it, he put his own publication into it, and he was already an author with another writing house. So if they got anything, it was at the low end of that totem pole. And then it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to live in this house for 28 days. I'm going to make up absolutely everything here and give all the rights away so we can make sure that we are set and we have and then they move back to California in the middle of the night. They leave all of their property. They don't take a thing with them. And they move back to George Lutz's place that was there. And the place that he still had in California, he was still paying on. and his business failed.
Yeah. Well, that's just shitty luck. But
Yeah, well, shitty luck.
I will say I do find it strange that they left all their belongings. I don't know if it was just to make their story sound more convincing. Like, oh, they must be really scared if they left all their stuff. Listen, they had inspiration for this, okay? They had a lot of inspiration for their story. Also, their story just constantly changed, constantly. Oh, it was always like it started, like, at such a low level haunting and then just kind of escalated. A lot of the more wild stuff, they didn't claim until after the book was released. Also, The Exorcist came out before that. 73 is when the movie came out.
Yes. And the book had come out before.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Like 2 years before. But even on Jay Anson's book, it says scarier than The Exorcist.
Which is his publication house, though. That was they don't really have any say in that when it comes to the cover of the book, what's written on the book. They don't really have say in that. They certainly didn't. I mean,
Okay.
I'm sure the publication house didn't like, hey, Lutz, would you mind if we put this on the cover of this book so you can get money? I'm saying I don't think the Lutz themselves had any say in what the book cover or anything they wrote on the book to grab the eye of people. They didn't have any say in that whatsoever.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that they had inspiration to work with when it came to The Haunting.
Wouldn't you think that if you had horrible killings in this home and that was their inspiration, why were the manifestations that were happening were more centered around the family and the house than the ghosts of the family that was murdered there before?
What are you actually talking about? There is so many references to the DeFeos in their accounts of The Haunting.
What,
For sure.
levitation, green slime, window slamming? That has to do that says DeFeo to you?
No, not that. First of all, green slime, exorcist vomit,
Well,
anyone?
it,
Like, okay, so but no, no, no,
I
hear
think
me
you
out.
called it poltergeist poop.
Hear me out. Listen, they did. They connected so many of the haunting stuff happening there, like the position they kept finding themselves sleeping in. Because I guess that was one of them, right? Is that
Okay.
they kept finding themselves in the sleeping on their stomachs when they never slept on their stomachs before. Ooh, how weird. They're
I never
sleeping on
read
their
that.
stomachs now.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I never
I
read
did.
that. It's okay. But
No,
I
they're
mean, yes,
because that's what I'm saying. Their earlier accounts, I feel like, were much more connected to the DeFeos, and it was also way more toned down. And then when the book came out, all of a sudden, oh yeah, all this other crazy shit happened too, even though we didn't talk about it before. What?
well, that's the thing though, is that the book came out 2 years after they had fled. And they had talked to mainstream news media. They had gone on these kind of Tonight shows to kind of like spread the word and all this kind of stuff. And they had reported all sorts of stuff. And yeah, no, you're right. Where they sat there and said, well, it started off as like cold spots here, little things there, little things there. But of course, like anytime that we have a haunting, they escalate the longer that you were on this premises to where something is there that doesn't want you there is going to escalate the longer that you were invading its space. Basically, my answer to your question, Bree, is that I do not think that the Lutzes were well enough to profit off of anything. They had no idea where this was going to go if they were making it up. And I think that's too big of a gamble, especially when they just bought this giant house.
And I disagree. We may continue.
Well, you mentioned that they did interviews and told stories about everything that happened, but why do you think the Lutz family refuses to talk about the last night in the house?
I don't know. That's very curious. Maybe so they could leave it open for interpretation from an author who is writing a book. I don't know. I honestly can't tell you why they didn't talk about the last night in the house. I mean, is the last night mentioned in the book? I did not read Jay Anson's book, full disclosure, but I
I
know
did.
Colin did.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Does it talk about the last night?
It does, and to be honest with you, I personally think the reason why they maybe did not talk about the last night is because if it was, in a sense, what they or what Jay Anson had described, which once again he does state that what he basically got to write the book with were recordings that the Lutzits had sent them, and the last night basically talks about how the house was trying to keep them there, like the house had a mind of its own and it was trying to keep them there. Even though the entire point was to get them out of its space, all of a sudden it said, you know what? No, we want you here. But I think part of the reason why they don't talk about it was that something that it was so traumatic that it's too hard to relive.
Yeah, or they just couldn't come up with a good enough story that sounded believable. I don't know.
Speaking of stories, do you really think the Red Room exists?
Yes. Well, it does exist. Yeah, okay. About the Red Room. Yeah, it is proven that there is a small room slash closet underneath the stairs in the basement that is painted red.
Harry
However,
Potter's bedroom.
yeah, apparently, um, the DeFeo children used it for storage or something. I don't know why it was painted red, but it wasn't like a secret or unknown part of the house. Like it was always there, you know? And also, it definitely wasn't a gateway to hell. Okay. It wasn't a gateway to hell. It was a closet where somebody made an aesthetic choice to make it red for some reason. Maybe they had the paint lying around and they're like, why not? Who knows? But yeah, it does exist. But other than being a closet, I don't think it really has any other purpose.
So, to your point that the DeFeos had used it, all of that, that it wasn't a secret. It was a secret to the Lutzes. So, originally, when it was discovered, was it was kind of like where they stored their laundry machines on the back part of the basement, and then on the right side that goes under the stairs there was a shelving unit at where the shelves were kind of drilled into the wall, and that wall came out. And so to the Lutzes, they had no idea it was there. They had no idea why there were shelves attached to the wall. Like it was obviously meant to be hidden. Whether the DeFeos did that or the owners who sold it to the DeFeos, back in the 60s, no one really knows. But when George claims that when he went and got the floor plan that he was given by the realtors, that it wasn't there, it was not listed. And then he had gone to the library
Lies.
and he lies, but he went and looked up the original ground floor, like that when it was built, and it was there.
That's not true. Like,
But why
it
is it true?
wasn't
Because we know
hidden.
it was there. Okay.
It was there, but it was definitely on the plans. Were you saying they're on the plans?
Well, no, so George claims that when the plans that he looked at when he got them from the realtor, they were not there.
Untrue.
And he went to the
I don't believe it.
library and he got plans of the plot of land when the house was first built and it was there. So that's what George Lutz claimed.
That's what he
But he
claimed,
claims
but I don't.
yes, he claimed that he discovered it. Kathy talked about how she didn't really go into the basement a lot. She was not a big fan of it. She was really just there to kind of do laundry, all that kind of stuff. And it really wasn't something that she paid too much attention to. George said when they first discovered the room, they were kind of closing it up, and he had seen what he thought was himself standing there almost as an after image that was kind of projected onto the wall. And
Like a shadow?
not like a shadow, almost like a Polaroid. It was just this image that he could kind of see through a projection, and he thought it was himself. And he had found out later on that him and Ron or Butch looked very similar to each other, and he realized that he was seeing Ron DeFeo, not himself, on this kind of projection when they were closing the Red Room up. And then other people had, when they had opened the Red Room itself, people were just creeped out about it. And whether that could have easily been psychological, you have this random
Probably
room that
because
is
it was
painted red.
painted red. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, it could have, we all know from
Like, why
color
is this
theory, colors
closet painted
trigger,
red?
yeah,
Like, that's a
colors
choice.
trigger different memories. They trigger all sorts of things within our systems, and then of course, as we saw in the movie, it was kind of made as this gateway to hell. But George did speculate that he feels that the activity in the house amped up after they found the Red Room. That is something that he does state.
Okay.
And I think that might be the justification that, especially in the movie, that it kind of turns into this gateway to hell type ordeal. I think that might have been the justification. Yeah. But so you're saying you don't believe in gateways to hell?
I don't think it's in that closet. No. Didn't they also say the well was in there?
No, the well is underneath the front steps of the house that go up.
Yeah, that's where George Lutz found them, right? But like in the movie, didn't they move it to that
Yeah,
secret
yeah,
room?
it was like in this yeah, there was like a well type situation when he,
Yeah. He
went
falls through
through
the
the
floor.
steps
Yeah.
with my favorite line ever. But yeah. No. Careful, those stairs are tricky.
Oh, that movie. Anyway.
I know. It was great. Yeah.
Well, maybe the Red Room doesn't exactly explain the weirdness, but could environmental factors in the house explain the reported phenomenon? Or maybe the house was built on an ancient burial ground? What do you think about that?
The ancient burial ground thing, I knew that was gonna come up. I knew it. I don't believe that. I do think there were environmental factors, especially when it came to the flies. Do I think that it's on an ancient a Native American burial ground, right? That's what they say? Well,
Yeah, part of it.
that's not true because what the claim was, I think good old George claimed that what tribe? It was a specific tribe. The
Well, it
Shinnecock?
wasn't,
Is that how you say it?
yes.
The
Yeah,
Shinnecock tribe?
yeah.
He said that he went to some like Amityville historian and found out that the Shinnecock tribe used the land as a burial ground slash sick enclosure type thing, like a quarantine. But the Montaukett Nation confirmed that the tribe did not live near Amityville and never had one of those sick enclosures. So, yeah, I think the paranormal stuff that happened in the house or that is claimed happened in the house, yeah, I do think some environmental factors. I mean, there was these guys that actually went and looked at the house afterwards. And apparently, the window that George claimed slammed on his son's hand. Apparently, they found a spot that if you shifted your weight just right, the window would go up and down because the counterweights for the window weren't properly set.
I can understand how a window would slam down by the shifting of the weight, but I don't understand how a window would go back up with the shifting of the weight.
I mean,
That part doesn't make any
that's what
sense to
was
me.
claimed.
Yeah, that sounds like magic. Because like I said, I completely I
Your
that is some
magic.
Harry Potter. I completely understand, like I said, how a window could go down because of the shift of the weight and all that because of gravity, right? That makes 1000%. But for it to go back up, there's no force, there's no pressure involved with that. On a scientific sense, that
It
part
was
doesn't make
ghosts.
sense. But yeah,
No.
so in response, to that, do I think there are environmental factors? Yes, absolutely. Because there was this whole idea that there was this black tar stuff that was happening within the toilets. That could have easily been environmental, but also they did bring out because there were trees on the land. Now I've owned property and I've had roots grow into pipes and all of that. They did not claim any of that. It was just one day they were flushing toilets and all this black goo is there, and then within hours it disappears. Now,
Mm.
the son, Daniel, and I bring up your point again of the flies themselves. So Danny did sit there and state that he was the first to discover the flies in the playroom. The day that they moved in, he was moving, box to box to box to box to box, and he had taken out like a newspaper and he had says that he killed a whole bunch of the flies, just swat and fly at fly at fly at fly. And then he went to his mom to say, hey, like there's a whole bunch of flies up in this playroom. And they would go up and all these flies that he said he killed with this paper, there was no bodies there was nothing. There were still flies in the window, but there were no dead flies on the ground, almost as if they had just completely disappeared. So my question
Well,
to you, Jess, is like, what was the environmental factor to flies? Because flies are born from maggots and maggots come, they have the meat. So was there meat in the windows? What was the environmental
no.
factor for flies?
Okay, so something unfortunate I learned was that the DeFeo family wasn't removed from the house for 48 hours and the house was completely sealed with the heat on. I think that might have had something to do with the flies, especially because I heard and I kind of saw, they say that Dawn got it the worst out of that. It was the most violent, the bloodiest one. And that's the room. Her room was the fly room. So
See, I would have to look because I mean, because Danny said it was the playroom, and I'm not sure if the playroom they chose a room to be a playroom was in fact
they
like
probably
that
made
room
it the
of
playroom,
yeah,
but originally it was
absolutely.
Dawn's room was upstairs.
Yeah. But they moved in a year after the murder. So what were the flies? So what were the flies eating? And the flies, how could they still be reproducing off of absolutely nothing?
If there was an infestation that wasn't taken care of, it can produce more. It could get worse over time. It's possible.
Yeah, but wouldn't the whole house be, encompassed, engulfed in flies, especially a year later
Not
if there was an
necess
infestation?
not necessarily. I mean, it
So how come the flies
was
would
on the
appear and then
it was on the top floor. I don't know, quick acting spiders? What do you want me to say? Like, they had some fast ass spiders that as soon as Daniel left the room, these fucking spiders came out and they went to town, and then by the time he brought his mom up there, the corpses were gone because they were all consumed by fucking spiders on cocaine. That's my answer to
okay.
that, Colin.
Cocaine spiders. And
Yep,
and when we talk
cocaine
about
spiders.
when we talk about the idea of the Indian burial ground, all that kind of stuff, I the only thing that I mean, look, I understand you're 100% right when it comes to the research of that. There were plenty of people that said, "Hey, look, like this didn't we don't have records or what the records that we do have show this, but we don't have anything prior to that." And to quote, the late great psychic Sylvia Brown, "The land, honey, the land." Look, generational people today will get the meme, okay?
You mentioned experiences inside the house. Why do you think multiple people had experiences outside the house?
Well,
So
people.
that's yeah, multiple people had
Well, I know
experiences outside the house.
I know the priest, Father Carraro,
Pecoraro.
Father Piccolo.
He's deceased.
I'm so sorry. I'm
Pecoraro.
so
It's
sorry to
okay.
hear about Father Parakeet. I'm so sorry. No, I am genuinely sorry. I'm sorry. I can't remember his name. Pecoraro,
Yeah,
correct?
yes, that's correct, yeah.
Okay. Father Ralph Pecoraro.
Yes.
I knew he was affected. I knew that the Lutz family was affected afterwards, even after they moved away.
Correct, yeah, for when they went to, Kathy's mother's house, who lived there in, she lived in, like, almost New York City itself,
Mhm.
but not when they went to California, just when they were still in the state.
Well, okay. So when it comes to Father Pecker, oh my gosh.
The priest.
When it comes to the priest, unfortunately, I'm not sure if I believe his account just because there is conflicting reports from people about whether he even like entered the home.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, and apparently like things he said were contradictory at times. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know any other people who were affected other than them, though.
So her brother and Kathy's brother and sister-in-law were both affected. They had stayed the night in the house. They
Mhm,
had stayed in their little girl's room, and she had slept on the couch downstairs. They had an experience in the house to where the sister-in-law woke up in the middle of the night. She said there was a little boy at the foot of the bed, and he asked her where the Molly I cannot remember the little girl's name, but asked her where the girl was, and she woke up screaming. So, like, they left that night, and those 2 continued to especially the sister-in-law, she was having terrible dreams.
wait, are you talking about the Lutz family? Was he asking for
Yes.
Missy?
Missy, that's her name, thank you. The sister-in-law woke up, she said there was a little boy at the foot of the bed, and he was asking where Missy was, and her and her new husband left the house that night. They were too freaked out to stay, and they went back to his mother, Kathy's mother's place. That's where they, were originally staying.
Mhm,
And they continued to have experiences, or at least the sister-in-law claimed to continue to have experiences of having these terrible dreams about the 112 Ocean Avenue house, and then all of that. And then also there were other witnesses as far as the priest was concerned. But in all honesty, like, there was a man who was writing, I don't know if he ever finished the book, but he was writing a book about the Amityville house, and the owners at the time allowed him to come to the house to kind of maybe get inspiration or talk to people. And he claims that while he was in the house, he was just having terrible migraines, headaches. He was hot, he was cold. It was almost like he had the flu while physically in the house. And then when he would leave, he would actually get better. But the thing about that is that he would go across the Hudson. There's this theory and the paranormal that a lot of ghosts can't cross water or running water. So the idea of that the Lutz's haunting kind of disappeared when they went literally across the United States back to California. It was almost like what was haunting them couldn't follow because of that theory of olden times and witchcraft and all of that. They, spirits can't cross the running water. There's also a neighbor boy who refused to come into the house. He would only want to play outside with the children. And Danny also talked about that in his documentary. It was a neighbor kid who had talked about he was in the house one time and something happened that he refuses to talk about. And outside the house, he still experiences, whether it's the PTSD of what he claims he experienced or anything such as that, or whether they were true hauntings. But there's plenty of documentation.
Is it possible that the Lutz family asked them to do that so that their claims were more supported by more than just them?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. But I also don't think that the Lutzes went to the neighbor kid and said, hey, could you pretend to have an experience here for a couple years ago that you no longer talk about it anymore because we know it's not real? Like Danny was
I
9 years
mean,
old when this thing happened. And Danny came out, what, 30 years later, 40 years later, and sat there and said, with this documentary and said, hey, this neighbor kid refused to go in the house because of an experience he had. The Lutzes didn't even know who the neighbor kid was. The kid came from across the street because the boys were playing outside.
but still, I mean, it went like if the kid came forward with this claim when? Like after
That
everything?
is yeah, the kid told Danny because the Danny was like, "Let's go inside and let's get some juice, get some water, whatever." And the kid said, "No, he was not going in there." And everyone
Okay.
had
Well,
assumed it was because of obviously the murders that had happened there. And
yeah.
then Danny had said in the documentary that years later he had, obviously he befriended this kid, and the kid said, "No, something weird happened to me," and he refused to talk about it. That's why he never wanted to go in there. It had nothing to do with the murders, according to him.
But he didn't specify if it was paranormal. He just said something weird happened.
Yeah, yeah. He never specified it was paranormal or anything such as that. But I mean, obviously, it's like, look, if I'm a 9, 10, 11-year old and I'm not going in a house because something weird happened, I'm going to assume it was paranormal.
I
Something
mean,
that
to
I
be
can't
fair, it
explain.
was it was a creepy looking house,
From
especially
the
the eyes.
side.
It had
Well, that
well,
was from the side though. The house was warm and inviting when you look at it from the front porch where the
yeah.
kids
I
played.
mean, I see around the time of the DeFeo murders, it was painted like a dark color, and that made it look really scary in my opinion.
I
But
also thought it looked like 1428 Elm Street. It was kind of, the white offish color. Now, a lot of the photos that I got to see of the house when the DeFeos owned it was more black and white because there were a lot of crime scene photos and stuff like that. So I'm not really familiar of how it looked in the colorized version. I didn't really see a lot of those.
no, I just know it was a dark color when the DeFeos lived there, and then I think it was painted white before the Lutz family moved in.
Gotcha.
All right. Well, the DeFeos and the Lutzes both reported hauntings. Why do you think future residents did not report any?
Because nothing happened.
I knew that was gonna be your answer.
Yeah, I mean, you have to admit, Colin, it's strange that all this crazy shit happened and then Jim and Barbara Cromartie move in and then nothing is reported ever again.
Correct.
Like, come on. You got to give that one to
I
me.
Well, I don't because I honestly
Damn it.
think I know, but
I
here's the
thought
thing
this
is
would
that
be an easy one.
no. So, I have 2 theories in the sense that you have, Lorraine Warren who claims that the house was exorcised, right? So they got rid of whatever was there, what was haunting the families, it's gone, yada. That's one theory, coming from an expert demonologist. The second idea is that they claim there was a lot of poltergeist activity. Poltergeist activity is very well known for literally starting out of the blue and then disappearing for years on end and never starting ever again. So I look at the
Is
idea
that a
that
well
maybe
known thing about poltergeist? I was
poltergeist,
not
yeah,
aware.
yeah,
I did not know that that was a common theme in poltergeist that they
yeah,
just
yeah.
fuck off.
Well, a lot of people feel that because the poltergeist is not necessarily a ghost. Poltergeist is unused energies that is spent that it was usually within a child. You had 3 children in that house. The oldest was 9 years old. So when you look at the idea of if we take that idea of that poltergeist is unspent energy that is within a child. Usually it's a
You're
child coming of
you're talking
age,
about the
usually
Lutz family?
female. No, no,
Or are you talking
I'm
about the
just saying
DeFeo family?
neither. I'm saying
Okay.
that in a in the paranormal world,
Mm.
that poltergeist, there's the theory that, poltergeist is just unspent energy that is usually within a child. And normally it is usually within a female of coming to age. There's TK things happening, there's electricity popping on and off, all that kind of stuff.
So wait, poltergeists are attached to hormones?
Hold on, I'm getting there, right? So, but what I'm stating is that the reason why they say this is because us as human beings, we know this for a fact. We are energy, right? That is
Mhm.
what we are made of. That is what we expel, right? We create, we expel, we move on with the cycle. And a lot of people theorize that as we grow up and we go through puberty, we go through all these emotions, these hormones, all this kind of stuff, we are expelling that energy in a regular cycled fashion.
Mm.
Unfortunately, females who, when they are coming of age, and their cheese graters and their stomachs start moving up and down and expelling much more. Um,
Gross. Why are we talking about this
I,
now? How did
but
we segue
I,
into this?
because I'm
I'm gonna
explaining
vom.
what people no, okay, but look, so a lot of people think that poltergeist activity stems from a young girl coming of age in a home and that is accidentally expelling all of this energy at all this pent-up energy at one time. A lot of other people claim that poltergeist activity, they are literally demons from hell or noisy ghosts, as we say in German. But then you have demonic activity, or what some people also call poltergeist activity, to where it is a whole bunch of random things that are moving around. Things don't make any sense. There's manifestations left and right, and then it just stops. Because whatever this is like, well, done toying with you. Have a good time.
Like, yeet.
But exactly. But it's also maybe it wasn't necessarily the house that was haunted. Maybe it was the Lutzes that were haunted. Danny says that when they were in California, he witnessed George in the garage using telekinesis to move things with his mind. And he says that George had books dealing with the occult all around the house prior to Amityville, and that he was involved in the occult and that Kathy knew about
Wait,
it.
wait, 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 wait.
Yeah.
So this is the oldest kid,
The oldest son. Yeah. Yeah. So when
and
he
he's
was like seven
claiming
or
that George was involved with the occult?
correct, yeah. He says that George was, involved with the so he claims that George had a whole bunch of books on the occult around the house when they lived in California,
I wonder where he found inspiration for the haunting.
and he also says that he witnessed George use telekinesis in the garage to move things around,
So he was
and,
Carrie.
going to the prom. So there was also a parapsychologist by the name of Peter Jordan. He says that he was invited by the second owners, the Kramaga, their
So
names.
Cromartie?
Yeah, Cromartie, thank you, of December 1977, the owner of the Lenses. And he brought a psychic friend by the name of Ron Marguerite. And Ron says that he felt residue of ritual magic in the home. And it was a residue that was there prior to the Lutzes. So the parapsychologist Peter Jordan and then the psychic Ron Marguerite, they both feel that the Lutzes and the DeFeos were involved in something that got out of hand for both of them, that they did not know what they were doing in this kind of black magic type area. Joel Martin, who was a journalist of the Amityville itself when the murders went down, he claims that through his research that George triggered something by being open to the idea of the occult. He feels that DeFeo left something behind because he was involved in the occult and they got themselves involved in something extremely deep that they couldn't get themselves out of. It was the 70s. You had satanic panic happening a couple of years prior to that. So I do feel that maybe that's why the hauntings ended. It stopped.
Mm,
He,
okay.
he either took it with him or he closed a door that he opened.
I don't know. I almost feel like Daniel's account of his dad kind of helps my side more than yours, just because finding out like he was really into that stuff. I mean, yeah, he could have came up with a story like this for sure if he was into that stuff.
Do you think maybe it also all had to do with the involvement of John Ketchum?
God, I'm gonna vomit. First of all, how do you spell his last name? Because I've seen it spelled like four different ways.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's like ketchup, only Ketchum.
See, I've seen it spelled with a C. I've seen it spelled like with an A instead of a U. Like I've seen it spelled all different types of ways.
Reports do show that there were literally like 25 John Ketchums within the surrounding area of Amityville itself. There was the one that people think that they're talking about. He was a prominent citizen of Amityville. He settled in the Huntington Township, and he was from Massachusetts near Salem, and he acted as like a representative to the local government that was there. But the other thing is that there was no definitive proof that he was a practitioner of witchcraft or anything such as
Yeah.
that. But then again, these records are coming from 1698, 1697. So, he literally left Massachusetts, where obviously there was the Salem witch trials happening, to come over to New York. Who's to say that he wasn't a practicing or a practitioner of the dark arts? He literally left Salem. Why did he leave Salem, Massachusetts, if he wasn't scared?
I hate the Ketchum theory.
Oh, it's a terrible theory.
I hate it. I hate the Ketchum theory. Yeah, there's evidence he may have existed, but like you said, there's no evidence that he fled from Salem or was a practicing witch. I mean, I'm pretty sure family members in the area, because there is a road very close to Ocean Avenue. It's where it's like Ketchum Road, and
Yes.
the family has like disputed it completely.
Uh, this is the reason why, because like I said, there are literally like 25 different John Ketchums. It was apparently a very common name, or there was a lot of incest happening.
There's
But
not even evidence that he was connected with that specific property.
correct. The only reason why the reports that I found thought that maybe they were talking about this particular one was because there was a John Ketchum. He was from Ipswich, Massachusetts, which was a community that was near Salem, and he had moved and settled in Huntington Township on Long Island. And while he lived in Massachusetts, and this is how they know he was from Massachusetts, he acted as a representative of the local government before returning to and moving to Long Island. And that is where he resided. That's where his grave is. He was survived by his wife, Bethia, 4 children, yada, yada, yada. Now, Huntington Township, they do state, is more than 10 miles from Amityville. But once again, we're talking about someone who migrated over to this town, this Huntington town that was 10 miles from Amityville in the 17th century. What he did prior when he was in Ipswich, aside from being a local representative of the local government, we don't know. The fact that they are basically disputing that idea, I'm not a huge fan of people disputing, because here's the thing is that we know that witchcraft or dark arts or practices were practiced, especially in the 17th century. We know that. Unfortunately, we had the Salem witch trials where innocent people were accused and basically murdered. But there is plenty of evidence that state that, yeah, there were people practicing and they were doing stuff. Who's to say that this John Ketchum, who was from this area,
No, there's literally no evidence that backs that. There's none. There's claims, but there's no physical evidence that backs that claim.
but there's also no physical evidence that says it didn't happen.
But there's more evidence to show like that it didn't happen.
Not necessarily, because we know we have the records of when the house was built. We know that there was a well there, and then everything prior to that with the land
I mean, the
itself. We
house was
don't know who
built
was
in
on it.
1927.
Yeah, but we're also stating that John Ketchum was from 1697. So what do we know what happened on that property from 1700 to 1927? We don't know. Is my point.
But the thing is, he didn't live at that property.
Yeah,
There's no evidence to show that he has
correct.
anything to do with that property.
But I've also myself gone out to other locations and done stupid stuff.
I think it's more likely that he wasn't on that land, that he was. I know there's a house that's in the area that he was built or something and moved or whatever, but there's no evidence that he was ever actually there or did anything on that property at all. It's much more likely, in my opinion, that this story was created because, like I said, there's a Ketchum Street, right? Like, from what I've gathered, Ketchum is actually quite a notable family in that area.
Yes.
There's properties named after them and stuff like that. There's all that about them, but there's nothing that connects them. So who's to say somebody didn't just like take that name because it was there and knew the brief history of where this guy came from and that he was right by Salem, and then just kind of came up with all this shit, like just because of the time frame and because where he came from. That just seems way more likely to me than this guy who didn't live on the property, fled Salem and he was a witch and, he lived over there, but he decided that this exact spot is where he was going to practice his devil magic. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me personally.
Well, I'm not gonna practice my devil magic in the house, I'm gonna I'm gonna go
What
practice at
animal would practice their devil
yeah, what
magic
animal would
in
practice
the
their devil magic in
house?
the house? I don't know, that leaves stains on the floor, there's, it's a lot.
It's
You
just a
have to
big
do
old
that.
mess.
It is, and you have to do that at different locations, that's where you need to go, you know?
That was good. That was good. No practicing devil magic in the house.
No, it's gonna be a T-shirt. Um, but my point is that I don't know what happened on this land in between, 1697 to when it was built in 1927. I don't know what has been manifested on it. Once again, you are correct in the idea of it is highly improbable, and I agree with you. But I also don't know if anyone was murdered on that piece of property, on that land and aspect. I don't know if maybe people were walking, if and they died of maybe there's a drug overdose. I don't know what has physically happened on this property in that span of like 300 years. Anything could have happened.
Yeah, it I don't know. It just seems like these very vague pieces of Amityville history of just the town in general were just taken and used to fit the story, in my
Yeah,
opinion. And
I
that's where I
agree. I
stand
can
on it.
agree with that. I can agree with that. Yeah.
Well, you talk about evidence. How do you feel about the ghost boy photo?
Ooh, I think the ghost boy photo is actually kind of funny. Just because it doesn't look like an apparition, it looks like a real ass person that's just peeking their head over and is like, "What's up?" It looks like a real person with glasses. Now I know the original theory is that it's John Matthew DeFeo. And yeah, I could see the button nose and all that, but
If you've seen the
if
side
like
by side photos of John Matthew and that
yes,
photo,
I get
look,
it. Yeah, the cute button nose, all that, totally. But also there was Paul Bartz, which was an assistant to the Warrens, and if you look closely at the photo, you can see glasses and you can see light reflecting off those glasses. And what did Paul Bartz wear? Glasses.
now also the one thing that I throw that wrench into your gears there about Paul Bartz is that he didn't look like a child at all. He looked like a grown
No,
ass
but he was
man.
young and like he was younger,
He didn't have a bowl
and he's
haircut. He
is there a
did
bowl
not have.
haircut in the hold on, let
It
me look at the
it
photo
looks
again.
like a bowl haircut. Yeah.
Okay, first of all, it's not a bowl haircut. It's not a bowl haircut. It's like a parted cut. It's he's got like side bangs. It's not a bowl cut.
So here's the other thing, right? Looking at this photo, to me, it looks like this kid's wearing pajamas, like plaids, like little plaid pajamas. And honestly, this, in my opinion, I think that it looks more like Mark DeFeo, who is the 12-year-old. I don't really see a 7-year-old looking at this photo. That's just me personally. I see more of a 12-year-old.
So
But
now you think it
honestly,
was the other son.
I do. To me, this looks more. But I've also seen the photos been brought up of John and this picture side by side, and they do look very similar. I don't know if I've seen photos of Mark, but I do know that their photographer looked nothing like this. And if we're looking at the
It's not a great quality picture, is it? I mean, it was taken in the 70s.
yeah,
Like,
and
it's
this was
not
an infrared. This was an infrared photo, which is why we have, the glowing eyes. I don't necessarily when I zoom in on it, I don't necessarily see glasses. Also, if you zoom in and look above, if you look above this boy's head, do you see this image that's right there? If
what
you just
image?
scroll like if you zoom in, so if you just
Yeah.
zoom in on the photo and then you scroll all the way up, like just till it stops, like right there on the door. It's in the dark. It looks like a panther.
I see what looks like a light fixture.
See, I see a panther. I don't know. I'm not saying it's anything. I'm just
You
saying it's
see a
kind of weird.
floating panther in this picture.
I do, yeah. Or it looks like a
I
face to me.
see I see a hanging light fixture is what I see.
What? Okay. Well, no, I mean, yeah, maybe. Anyway, back to this photo. Once again, I see what looks like he's wearing plaid pajamas. This does not look like a grown ass man
That's
to
not
me who's
what
like
he wore though. That's not wha that's he didn't die in plaid pajamas.
I have no idea. I assume they were wearing pajamas when they went to bed.
They were wearing pajamas, but he was not wearing plaid pajamas. I can tell you that.
Was Mark wearing plaid?
No, I don't think so.
But also, I mean, to me, this is kind of like looks like a plaid shirt, just in general. But, who's to say when it comes to the idea of, when you die, you have to wear what you died in? I don't make the rules. I don't really know.
No, well, Paul Bartz was known for wearing plaid shirts. That was, like, what he would wear
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. I also just don't see. To me, this looks like a child. Now, I will say, in your defense, okay, and I want that on record. Do I think that it is a little odd that as soon as we have a psychic sleepover, as they kind of dubbed it, we all of a sudden get a picture, right? Like we get some sort of activity right away. I have been to plenty of hauntings or alleged haunted places myself, and I have looked through tons of research of my own doing. Do I find stuff? Yes, but does it happen right away? No.
Well, the thing about that camera, though, is that it was set up and left. It was taking sporadic images. So, yeah, I really do think Paul Bartz was just kind of peeking his head in to see, like, if the camera was good. He was probably testing it out or something, or just, happened to be looking in and to check on the camera.
Don't really know if Paul Blart did not look like that I'm aware of.
I thought it kinda looked like him. I saw younger photos of him, and I thought, like, yeah, you could definitely see some similarities in the face.
Yeah, but Paul Bartz was when he was with the Warrens, he was still what? And he was a grown ass man.
He was a young man
And yeah, but he was definitely over the age of 21 years old. That's what I mean when I say,
still.
a
He
grown
could
ass
have baby
man.
face.
Yeah, I don't know. I find this picture as great as it is, especially when I first saw it as a kid. I was like, "Oh my god." I find it to be very inconclusive. But here's the other thing, right? If I am working as kind of a professional photographer, I set up this camera, I did this, I did that, yada yada. I know what it does. Why am I coming out of this room on all fours, peeking around a corner? Why am I doing that? That makes
He isn't on all fours.
no, to get that height, to be that height, look at the door compared to the height. That's the reason why it looks like a child. He was a, what, 5'11", 5'10"?
it looks like he was just kinda in that room and, like, he was sitting and kinda chilling in that room, and then he just got up to peek.
I feel like in order for me to really understand and look at this photograph, I need to see a better angle of the room. This kind of side angle thing doesn't really make too much sense to me. I believe this was what, the 2nd floor? And then the stairs go up to the attic, but it's a little weird to me. I also look at the angle because here's the thing is that if you look between the slats of the banister and everything, it does look like someone is sitting right there at that very bottom step. And yeah, now that I look at it from that angle, I see it two different ways. I really do. It kind of looks like if you look at the very bottom of the photograph itself, you see this dark shape that looks like legs, like someone is sitting on the bottom step and they are
Mhm.
turned like this. I see that. I don't actually now that I'm looking at it from that viewpoint, I don't even see them in the doorway. I see someone sitting on the bottom step. The only thing that I'm missing is a hand. Like if I'm sitting on the bottom steps, just kind of like chilling out, and I turn to look at something, my hand would probably be on the banister. That's just a natural thing to do. So to me, it's very inconclusive. I will say that. But I give more credit to Jess's side as this being an accidental photograph. I am leaning more towards that the longer I look at it.
Well,
You're
thank
welcome.
you. I know it's difficult to admit defeat. I know it's difficult. It's okay. I'm here for you.
What do you think of the Warrens' involvement with this case? And can you describe some of the things that happened at the paranormal sleepover?
Yeah, I can. I say, the Warrens themselves when it came to this particular case was kind of their claim to fame. Not only was it their claim to fame, it was also Hans Holzer's, who was around prior to them, but it was also kind of the case that, put them up in the ranks of infamy. The Warrens were not contacted first about it. Lutz had actually, via what I read in the book and the research, is that he was told by the diocese that there were some people who experimented or involved themselves in this type of matter and to contact them. He had left messages and contacted these people of the psychic research center essentially, and they had tried to contact him, but the house wouldn't allow it. There was the whole static on the phone thing, and he actually did not get a hold of them until after he had left the house. So
Wait, you're
Lorraine
saying
did.
I'm sorry,
Yes, you're okay.
really quick. You're saying the Lutz family contacted the Warrens.
No, the Lutz family contacted a group of researchers out of the. I believe it was like the New York. I have it written down somewhere. I do
Are you
apologize.
talking about Dr. Stephen Kaplan?
Quite possibly, yes. Because it's in the book about who they contacted. The diocese said, look, there's these people who work on this kind of stuff. George Lutz had contacted them. He had left messages with them. And they had claimed that they tried to respond, but the phone line was having issues, which was a very common occurrence within the house. And
Okay, well,
then,
if you're talking that's definitely not Kaplan investigation. The Kaplan
no,
investigation, though,
no,
because well, no, the Kaplan investigation, George Lutz fired him because he
yeah,
basically said, "If this is a hoax, I will expose that." And then George fired him. So you can't be talking about that group.
no. I should have wrote it
But
down.
I
I
know
didn't.
that when it comes to the Warrens, I think it was that journalist lady, Laura
Yeah, it's a Dia.
Didio, is that how you say it? I pretty sure she contacted the Warrens about the house.
Correct. So she had worked with the Warrens on a couple of other cases, just kind of being this kind of liaison with them. She's the one who did contact the Warrens initially, and she was contacted by this other group, and they were to meet George on the property because he refused to go in. He could stay outside, but he refused to go onto the property. And Laura, has dubbed it as a like paranormal sleepover because there were not only the Warrens there, but there were a lot of other psychics. And so she states that she said there were a couple of very interesting things that did happen that night, and which involved her cameraman. Now, he got called in to do this last minute, right? And he says that he went up the stairs with his light meter to adjust the lighting, all that kind of stuff. And he got about halfway up the first flight of stairs. He turned around, he looked at Laura with a quizzical look on his face, and he says, there's a room on the second floor. It's the second bedroom, the second door on the right, and one wall is filled with mirrors. And he says, I don't know how I know that. Again, he was like, I have no idea, but he says that's the master bedroom with the Lutzes, and where obviously Louise and Ronald DeFeo were murdered. He had never been to the house before. He literally got the call last minute, but he says, I just kind of got this vision of this room. He continued to go up the stairs. He turns around. Laura was at the bottom of the stairs looking up at him, and she says she saw all the color drain out of his face. He clutches his chest and he doubles over. At that point, the sound guy and the other lighting guy, they run up the stairs, they bring him back down. He sits on the bottom steps and his pulse was pretty rapid. He goes, I just had heart palpitations. I just felt this heaviness. I've never felt anything like this. That was scary. And there were a bunch of other claims from the parapsychologist Peter Jordan. And then also there was a news reporter who was there that night who also claims that he saw the cameraman go up, turn around, say the stuff, and then come back down the stairs. And then they also talked about how there were two seances held. One was held downstairs, one was held upstairs. And really, other than that, not much happened. Obviously, Lorraine had insisted that there was a dark entity there. It would squeeze people, it was like a dark shadow. It was taking over basically the personalities of George himself, and that it was causing him to become this other thing that was in the house.
Mm. Well, when it comes to the Warrens' involvement, though, we know they were very ka-ching minded, and when this story started blowing up, ka-ching. That's I think a lot of people saw ka-ching when it came to this story.
To that point, though, the Warrens had investigated. They had over 100 cases under their belt prior to Amityville, and none of them went ka-ching. So why this one?
Because they were waiting for it to go ka-ching,
So what we're saying, or you think that they involved themselves because they said, "Oh, this is the one that's definitely going to make us money."
possibly.
None of the ones prior to that, they said, "Oh, well, we're just going to help these people because they need help," or like, I guess I'm just trying to figure out like what do you think their motive? I mean, aside, I guess what I'm trying to say, and I'm not trying to get controversial with you, and I apologize, is that why do you think this particular case influenced the Warrens to really take it on because they thought it would be a moneymaker?
Well, if at first you don't succeed. I mean, come on. Like they were just like we can't get into the whole Warrens
Yes, yeah,
discussion.
yeah,
That's a whole separate
yeah. That's a whole
thing.
series.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but they definitely wanted to profit off of what they were doing for sure. And it was during a time where stuff like this was becoming cool, especially with like movies like The Exorcist. It was becoming popular. You say yourself, satanic panic. They were just trying something, anything, but then this one gains notoriety and they're like, "Well, let's try this one." I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm speculating. Well, that's all we can do is really speculate about their
I
motives.
think the Warrens were contacted because they had a reputation. Their reputation already preceded them prior. And I feel that they were contacted because they have, allegedly helped numerous families before and
Mhm.
they had a really good credit. I firmly believe once again that Lorraine Warren was true to the claims. I do think a lot of things of that. I'm not going to sit here and say that I think they were necessarily money motivated at that point in time of going into it. I think that became a factor later. I think this might have been something that kind of they involved themselves because they truly wanted to help and it became what it became. And no one controlled that, it did what it did. But yeah, and I think their involvement helped in a sense. I know watching the documentary with Danny, like he went back and visited with Lorraine and they talked about a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah. But I think they went into this aspect of wanting to help this family.
Yeah, I mean, they did do it before the book was published. How can you say they were there to help the family though when it already happened? Like it was done.
True.
The
Yeah.
Lutzes were gone. They didn't want the house anymore.
Yeah, I know you're right.
Like there was nobody to help anymore,
But I still
really.
think there's closure. Ed, did have sit downs with the family and they did talk about the experiences that had happened because the family was still, in a sense, even if it's in their own minds, being haunted because there is still a psychological aspect that was happening. So I do think after Lorraine felt that this was a true haunting, that she wanted to better assist the family and whether it was meditation or practices through the church to help them be stronger in their faith.
Well, I would like to think that the Warrens had good intentions with helping. I would like to think that. Do I necessarily believe there were good intentions? I don't know. I can't tell you. It could go either way, honestly.
Um, there has been an investigation, there has been movies, there has been documentaries about the Amityville house, but there's also a famous book by Jay Anson. And what do you think about that? Do you think it's fictionalized or based on true events?
Yeah, I do think Jay Anson made up a lot of stuff for the book. I do. I think he got the story from the Lutzes and said that's not enough and embellished. Like I even saw in one of the documentaries I watched, like a friend who spoke to Jay Anson. I guess he was another writer of like paranormal stuff, and I think he called Jay Anson out on the exaggerated stuff that happens in the book. And Jay Anson was basically like, "Well, you can make pennies off your truth, but this is going to set me up for life." And it did. It did set him up for life. So, like, yeah, there's reports from people who knew him that even he admitted that he was trying to profit greatly off of this. It's hard to think that like he just wrote a true story, because he wanted to get the truth out there. It doesn't seem like that to me.
I agree with you to a certain extent.
What?
I know because I did read the book and it read very fiction-esque, and I say
Mhm.
that because Jay Anson, wrote more fiction after this book, and prior to that, he was known to have written fiction. It's kind of like in that idea of like William Capote, right? William Capote wrote In Cold Blood, and he wrote fiction prior to this
Truman.
true crime novel.
Truman Capote.
What did I say, William? Did I say William Capote?
Yes, you did.
Okay, sorry. I'm so sorry. But like Capote, wrote this nonfiction that to me read like a fiction
In Cold Blood.
in Cold Blood. And
Mhm.
the same thing with Amityville Horror, I felt read like fiction. And I say this because he says at the end of the book that, what he feels is well documented and true because George and Kathy had documented their experiences with the voice recorder and sent him the tapes, and this is what he got from. But there are moments in the book to where there's a part where there's a foul smell happening in the house, and George is fed up and he goes running around and he's opening all the windows. And then it cuts to the detective who happens to be taking a drive around town, and he's driving by the Amityville house and he sees George opening all these windows. And I'm just kind of like, well, how do you know that though? How does Jay Anson know that that detective was doing that at that time? And that's why a lot of these other ideas and thoughts that were not of the Lutzes.
I actually kind of resent that you compared it to In Cold Blood because to me, what Capote did with that is he took something factual and made it sound like fiction. But he kept it factual, though. That's the thing. He kept the whole book factual. To me, that's not what Jay Anson did. Jay Anson took a story he heard and then embellished, in my opinion.
I agree. I feel that there were a lot of embellishments that were made. Even going back and watching the My Amityville documentary with Danny, Danny had some different claims. Granted, he was 9 years old, but he had some other different claims that he stated, like the boathouse was more of a hot spot than the whole house. He claimed that the house itself had uh, particular cold spots, which in the book, they don't really, Jay doesn't really talk about that. The reason why Danny remembers these cold spots so well was a lot of it had to do with the fact George kept the house very hot. And Danny was like, look, like these are definitive cold spots that are happening. But yeah, I think that Jay Anson also really, really took some of the minor haunting portions that were happening and just kind of blew them up to make them really large when according to Danny and according to other reports they weren't that big. Danny claims that a majority of the activity happened on January 6th, which was after the Feast of the Epiphany.
Man, you're really obsessed with Danny.
I really thoroughly
I feel
enjoyed
like
that
every
documentary.
question you find a way to bring him.
To bring it back to Danny, I thought I was going to hate
You
that
have a
documentary.
problem, Colin. Have you heard of parasocial relationships? Because I think you might have one.
I was obsessed with that documentary. There was so much right with it, so much wrong with it at the same time.
How do you feel about the timeline of the Amityville Horror?
It looks shady as fuck, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Everything
I
happens
agree.
like boom, 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 one right after the other. The Lutzes moved in like only 13 months after the murder.
Yep.
And
Exactly 13
then
months. Yeah.
and then it was 28 days and then like it's crazy. And then the paranormal sleepover happened and then, the book came out and then a movie came like it was just one thing after the other like in a very short amount of time. When you look at it all back to back and just see how close the dates are, it's nuts. But anyway, yeah, that's what I think.
No,
I
I
think the
I agree
timeline
with
is
you.
is crazy.
If you look at, because they moved in December of 1975, and then 4 years later we've already have a book and an adaptation.
Yeah.
Already 4 years.
Yeah.
And I think
You
that's
gotta admit,
insane. It's
that's a bit
insane.
suspicious.
It's not even a bit. I mean, that is a lot
Yeah.
suspicious. It
It's
is a
very
lot.
suspicious.
Yeah, I agree. No, I do sit there and say that they were, it feels like the experiences they lived through in that house, real or fictionalized. It almost feels like the way that people talk about it, it's like they were in that house for years. And I have to keep reminding myself they were only in that house for 28 days, not even a
Yeah.
month, you know. And what, 2 months after being out, George was already contacting people about the experiences that were happening and all of that. So, word traveled
Yeah, for
really fast.
something
And
for something that you think you would wanna leave behind, they sure didn't wanna leave it behind.
yeah, they left more of their belongings than they did their story.
For our last question, let's give our listeners a really good answer and a really good debate.
Okay.
Why do you think Amityville became famous?
Said it before because of The Exorcist. I think The Exorcist being popular definitely helped with that, for sure. I guess, like, spooky stuff was just trendy during that time, you know? People dug it, but, yeah, I really think it was just because, The Exorcist came out a few years earlier, and that was a spooky story. I mean, people, like, passed out in the theater there and all that, like, nobody had seen anything like that before, and then, like, these horrible, horrible, gruesome murders happen, and then this family who moves in right after claims that this crazy shit was going on, and that's gonna get people's attention. I really think it was just the time and what was popular around then. So, Colin, what do you think?
I think its tagline of "based on a true story" really hit home with people because The Exorcist wasn't based on a true story. It never claimed to be.
No, but it was
And
scary.
yeah, no, I think for movie purposes, yeah, because we watched the Amityville, and for that time, it was definitely creepy moments, great cinematography, yada yada yada. But I honestly do not know if people understood. I think there was this idea that you have a middle class suburban family, that you've got a woman who's got 3 kids who found another husband, and they live this perfect, peaceful life. How could something like this happen to them? And I think it's people related to that. I think a lot of people sat there and went, oh, that could be me. I could have moved into this house or moved to a house like it.
But look at The Exorcist too, because like, that was kind of a it was first of all, it was religious, so
Yes.
any, like, Catholic family with a daughter probably
Yeah.
scared the shit out of them.
And a lot of teen girls played with Ouija boards, at that time. It was kind of like a party thing to do, especially in the mid 70s.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think when it came, if you're looking at the success necessarily of, like, let's say The Exorcist, a lot of teen girls related to it. And I think a lot of families related to what happened to the Lutzes. I think a
Mhm.
lot of families sat there and said, I see myself in that because let's face it, a lot of murders happen. Unfortunately, in a lot of houses, unfortunately. And look, at the end of the day, people move right in. And those people don't speak up. A lot of those people have spoken up years and years later, or they never speak up at all because they're afraid that their story is going to be compared to someone else's, or they're going to be called crazy, or this or that. So I think a lot of people capitalize on this Amityville because no one else was doing it. As terrible as that is to say,
Yeah.
and kind of going to, Jess's point, I just think that the Lutzes stepped up and stepped out and were like, look, like this really happened. We had a terrifying experience in this house and we're not backing down. You can call us whatever you want, but this really happened to us, and then years and years and years and years later, the story is still corroborated by family members who are claiming, no, this stuff did happen and it still lives like I said, it just kind of lives within all of us. I honestly, going back to even being a child, it's kind of like if you would have asked me when I was like 6 or 7 years old looking into the paranormal, if I knew about the Amityville house, hell yeah, I did. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was just, it's there.
Even my mom read the book, and she doesn't like horror in the slightest. But she when she was younger, when the book came out, she read the book. So,
I think in response to that, there was, satanic panic was happening. The Ouija boards were high in success.
yeah.
With Parker Brothers or whoever. The paranormal was on the rise, and
Yeah.
like I said, this was just a family that came out and they stuck to their guns and they said, "This is what it is, and this is what really happened." And they just went up and up and up because of it.
Or maybe people were really into evil pigs, and they heard the whole thing about Jody,
Jody,
and they were like, "Yes, evil pig. That's what I need. I need more of
look,
that in my life."
maybe Jay Ketchum was killing pigs on that
No,
land.
okay. No, that's a stretch. That's a stretch. First of
Maybe
all, I already,
maybe that's
like
what he was practicing to kill. Like, maybe that's where he was doing his dark art, evil magic, was he
no,
was
listen,
they needed a sacrifice.
I think Jody I know we're getting a little off topic of what the question is. I think with Jody, there was a cat that the DeFeos had, and it was a fat cat. It was a really fat cat or obese cat. Is that more politically correct? Obese cat?
It was Garfield.
Apparently Ronald DeFeo would call it the pig. And according to neighbors, this cat would get on your window and just like press its whole body up against the window. So that's a Jody theory. Or it could be just like, an evil pig with red eyes.
Yeah,
Or it could have just been Missy's imaginary friend.
well, here's the thing is that Danny claimed to have seen it as well. Once again, going, my obsession with
Did he hear it meow?
No, he says that, him and his dad went into Missy's room, and he says to him, it was because they were on the 2nd floor, and out the window, due to the lights on the street, he could see. He says to him, it looked like a cartoon pig. It was like a cartoon with these red eyes. That was the best way that he knew how to describe it. He said it
Also
didn't
known
look,
as a fat cat. Sorry, morbidly obese cat.
but on the outside, it was on the second
Sure,
floor outside, like hanging on to
sure.
the window for dear
Why not?
life.
Why not?
you
We
know,
don't know how big this cat was. We have no idea.
well, it couldn't float. I mean, it wasn't filled with helium.
You don't know.
It. Well, I think that would kill it. But I mean, there was also like, but also Jody or Missy was the rocking chair that was in her room. That anytime that Jody would make an appearance or so in the room, and she would talk to her, the rocking chair was seen to have rocked back and forth to the point that George Lutz went up there and threw the rocking chair down the stairs. He broke it to pieces because they would go up there and
That seems like an extreme measure. You could have brought it
well,
to Goodwill. You could have
I don't
offered it to a
know.
neighbor. You didn't have to
He,
chuck it down the stairs.
he was
That's
scared,
just mean to
man.
the furniture, okay?
He was, yeah, but you love rocking chairs. Let's not forget that.
I hate rocking chairs in haunted scenarios.
You wouldn't throw a rocking chair down the stairs if you would, like,
No, I would
literally
just
see it
get
rocking all the
away
time?
from the rocking chair. I would just remove myself from the presence of the rocking
Yeah.
chair.
And George was getting angrier and angrier as his time in the house, went on. There's definitely a lot of talk about it, so it was like to wrap up on my end, it just honestly, all of this feels like a paranormal or not but like a poltergeist activity to where there seemed to be like an oppression that was happening to wear them down and then to possibly possess. Because Danny had also stated that there were
Here
numerous
we go with
times.
Danny
I
again. Oh
know.
my God, get a
He's
room,
a
you
great
two.
source.
Jesus.
But yeah, he says that he remembers, all the kids remembered that George would stand at the top of the stairs and scream about a marching band that was playing downstairs. He would just hear this band,
Was he
and
tripping? It was the 70s.
that it was the 70s. But George was not known to be a drunk or do a lot of drugs. But
Doesn't
once
mean he
again,
wasn't doing it.
it does not mean. But also, when you look at the idea of poltergeist activity or oppression, depression, and then possession, it is supposed to wear you down and to do anything in its demeanor to wear you down and then try to possess you. So that way you're weak. And
Okay.
that is what
Well,
looked like it was happening to George.
okay, well, my final thoughts is that this family got a house and there was a lot of problems with the house. And they were like, oh shit, we bought the wrong house. How are we going to get out of this house? And good old George, who apparently now I've come to learn was interested in the occult. I mean, he had a perfect story right there to use. Unfortunately, I hate that he used it. I hate that. I really dislike the fact that this paranormal story tends to overshadow the DeFeo murders because that was a real thing that happened. And it was a horrible tragedy. Like I've said, I think they just wanted out of that house. And I don't think it was because of the paranormal. And I think they had to get creative in order to try to make any kind of profit off of that house. I don't know. I don't it's hard to believe them because a real crime occurred and I think my anger about the fact that this story tends to, like I said, overshadow the DeFeo story automatically makes me like not want to believe them because it almost seems cruel to do. But yeah, that's my final thought. So, Bree, who won?
Don't necessarily think that I can determine that, but maybe our listeners can.
Yeah. I think you won because you had to listen to all of that BS.
And now she gets to stop.
I mean, that was a hefty conversation, y'all. I'd be really interested to know what our listeners think about it if anybody's listening. Hi, we appreciate you. And we would love to know your thoughts. So if we got things wrong, if there were points we didn't bring up, if you have questions, feel free to email us at paranormalbspodcast@gmail.com. And we look forward to hearing from you guys. I would like to thank my sister Bree for stepping in and mediating this debate. I think she did an excellent job.
She did.
And you guys will definitely be hearing her in the future.
Yeah, I look, this is it's always an honor to have these debates with you about stuff.
Oh,
We've
same.
Look, we've got so much more to cover in the world of paranormal, and I'm
We
very excited.
do.
Look, guys, if there are particular stories that you want us to cover, if you've got stories of your own, please let us know. Let us know your experiences. Let us know what's happening in your world as far as the paranormal is concerned. If you've seen Bigfoot, let us know. I want to know about it, and I want to discuss it, and I want to, bring Jess over to my side. She wants to believe in the paranormal so bad.
Do. I do. I really, really do. I just haven't been convinced yet. Nothing I've seen or read or heard has convinced me that this paranormal world actually exists. I would like to be wrong. I would, but I know I'm not.
So guys, get out of here. Let us know. Email us, follow us on everything social media. We have everything up there, and get out there and enjoy. Bye guys.
Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you in the next episode. Should we do the spirit box again?
Yeah, just make sure you don't I don't know. I think last time you turned off the television with it, so you do not know what you're doing.
That's
I will do it.
ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Fine, you do it. Fine.
I don't think it. Here we go.
Wait. Is that what it's supposed to do?
No, I don't think it is.
Oh, I'm actually scared.
Goodbye. Goodbye.